If you are a good fantasy manager, which you are, you know that defenses are probably the most important to get right because they can give you 20 points, but they could give you -3. In this video, I'll give you every single defense ranked S to F tier with some guys we can pick up on the waiver wire and also some really good fantasy playoff defenses that we can stash ahead of time, starting in the S tier with the Seattle Seahawks. Guys, if you appreciate this video, hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds. It helps me a ton as a creator, and subscribe if you want these defensive ranking videos every week because we go over all the numbers and everything. They get their matchup against the Tennessee Titans. This is really good. We know every single week the Tennessee Titans are allowing the #1 most fantasy points to opposing defenses. Cam Ward barely averaging over 100 passing yards a game. He throws an interception, turns the ball over, fumbles backwards. He does what he does. Great for defenses. And we know the Seattle Seahawks as an internal unit, as you can see here with the stats, one of the best in the league. So those two things matched up together. I have their ceiling over 15 fantasy points, but their floor is about 8.5. That is still insanely high. So they're my #1. Next up in the S tier, we do have the Baltimore Ravens. And if you've seen any of these videos earlier in the year, the Ravens were consistently one of the last defenses every single week, but they've been putting it together as of late. They have been restricting some offenses. They played some pretty decent teams, but now they get their matchup against the New York Jets. Justin Fields has been benched, which is a little bit more negative for this defense. Like, he would have been better. Tyrod Taylor is definitely not a great quarterback, though. He will throw interceptions, and this team doesn't have any playmakers. Like, we don't have Garrett Wilson in this offense. It's Breece Hall and nobody. The Ravens defense, especially in the pass game, has been stepping it up as of late. So I have their ceiling up at 13 fantasy points and a floor down at 7.7. A great option, just like the Green Bay Packers, who also makes it in this S tier, getting the Minnesota Vikings. 9, JJ McCarthy, whatever you want to call him, is not looking good right now. He's throwing an interception per game. You can see the stats for the Green Bay Packers here. They should be doing better than what they are. Michael Parsons is definitely making an impact, but still, they can put it together. The Minnesota Vikings team, if you can stop Justin Jefferson, there's not much else you have to worry about, but their ceiling is a little bit lower at 12.5 fantasy points because, again, the Minnesota Vikings do have some pretty good options, but their floor is up at 7.3 fantasy points. And dropping it down to the A tier, these are still defenses you can 100% go get. Check your waiver wire as we go through this video. Cleveland Browns, they get one against the Las Vegas Raiders this week. We know Geno Smith is averaging the most interceptions thrown per game so far this year, and the Cleveland Browns, one of the best defenses in the league. They have Myles Garrett. The defensive line is going to generate a ton of sacks on top of the turnovers. We know turnovers, sacks, interceptions, all of that turn into more fantasy points than just keeping a game low scoring. But the good news is this game is projected to be one of the lowest scoring game of the week. So we have all 4 pillars of what makes a fantasy defense good in this matchup. So I have their ceiling up at 12.5 fantasy points, their floor a little bit lower at 7, just because it's the Browns and we don't have a great offense. I will get into that a bit later, so make sure to stick around for it. But next up in the A tier, we do have the Detroit Lions getting one against the New York Giants. Now, we don't have Jackson Dart in this matchup. He has been ruled out with his concussion again, which does make them a bit more positive. The only thing is that this game is in a dome. We look at last week for the New York Giants. It was outdoors. It was insanely windy. So there was a ton of rushing attempts. You can see Devin Singletary and Tyron Tracy both had over 15 rushing attempts because of the wind. We know Jameis Winston is going to air the ball out a ton, and this Lions defense is pretty good against stopping the run, but the pass is a little bit easier. So Jameis Winston could have 50 passing attempts, and he could throw a couple interceptions. So with that and it being in a dome, the Lions defense is a little bit lower than usual. But we know Jameis Winston is famous for throwing his interceptions and making a few mistakes a game. They don't have a ton of great wide receiver options with Darius Slayton out this week. So the Lions are here. They have a ceiling up at 13.5. Again, if we have a bad Jameis day, a bunch of interceptions, that's where that comes from, but a floor down at 7. Next up, we also have the Las Vegas Raiders in this tier, them and the Browns. The reason both these teams are so high, again, the very low point total, but also we have Shedeur Sanders starting for the Browns this week. That could go astronomically south. Like, this could be really, really bad. The Raiders defense on their own, you can see here, not the best defense. Like, they definitely have some strengths, but in a matchup against Shedeur Sanders, you can expect 2 interceptions, maybe 125 passing yards. I believe his passing yard line on the books right now is the lowest in the NFL of any starting quarterback. That's really good. They also don't have the best weapons, so there's not really anywhere you can beat them. This is a really good situation for both defenses, and you could still pick up the Raiders on the waiver wire, so definitely go check that out in your league right now. Their floor down at 7 fantasy points, and their ceiling up at 12.5, a little bit lower compared to the rest of these guys that we've seen. But dropping it down another tier, we do have the New England Patriots. Now, they do get the Cincinnati Bengals without Joe Burrow. There was some speculation that he was going to come back this week, but he is not. That means we have Joe Flacco back in this offense. It's not terrible. It's not bad either. He definitely does make his mistakes, but we know the New England Patriots are on a tear right now. Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez, all of their defense is actually doing really, really well. So this should be a spot without Jamar Chase that they can be a safe defense, even if the offense for the Cincinnati Bengals are going to air the ball out and probably try to score a lot. So their ceiling is up at 10.9 fantasy points for me, but their floor is down at 5.7. So you can see this is where the clear teardrop starts from these elite defenses to these. You can still 100% go through and start the New Orleans Saints and other defenses like this. They get a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, which it hasn't been so negative, but now they have Kirk Cousins in this offense, which is very negative. Like, Michael Penix hasn't been great, but Kirk Cousins is worse. There's a reason he was sitting. And if we're not going to have Drake London in this matchup, which we don't, it's going to be Darnell Mooney and it's going to be Bijan Robinson carrying this game, maybe Kyle Pitts. The New Orleans Saints defense has been somewhat decent. They've had really tough matchups and just not good situations so far this year, but they can be a top 10 defense for me this week because of that. So I do like this situation here for them. I have their ceiling up at 11 and their floor at 6 fantasy points. Next up, we do have the Chicago Bears getting their matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably won't have Aaron Rodgers good to go in this matchup, regardless if they do or not. He hasn't been that great. They don't have a ton of defense beaters on that team. It's just a decent defense. They don't have Jalen Johnson back yet. They've still been pretty positive in allowing fantasy points and yardage this year. So the good news, as you can see here, they're one of the best defenses in forcing interceptions. That's where their bread and butter is going to be this week to be a top defense. It puts their ceiling up at 11.5, but their floor down at 5.7, just in case they don't get those turnovers. And next up, we do have the Los Angeles Rams getting one against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, again, not a great matchup. They do have Chris Godwin cleared to play this week. Bucky Irving probably won't be in there. Not like it'll change too much, but the Rams defense internally is very, very good. They've been great so far this year. This should be one of the higher scoring games of the week, so you're not banking on that to get your fantasy points. It's going to be sacks. It's going to be interceptions on Baker Mayfield. So I have their ceiling up at 10.5, but their floor down at 5.5. We also have the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Jacoby Brissett has been playing absolutely amazing in fantasy. He hasn't necessarily been the most accurate and efficient quarterback NFL wise, and the Jaguars defense has been putting it together against the run really, really well so far this year. It's not like they have to worry too much because Trey Benson is not going to be good to go this game, and Bam Knight and Michael Carter are going to lead the backfield. So, I mean, I guess that's a plus. If you can't get the run game going, it's going to hinder the pass game a lot more, and they don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., so it's going to be a Michael Wilson legacy game again. Jacksonville Jaguars are here with a ceiling up at 10.9 and a floor down at 5.8. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons getting their matchup against the New Orleans Saints. The Falcons defense has been hit or miss so far this year. They're a little bit more susceptible in allowing fantasy points to the pass game and wide receivers and quarterbacks. But the New Orleans Saints offense just really doesn't have a ton of playmakers outside of their top guys, of course. The Atlanta Falcons defense can generate sacks, and the New Orleans Saints offensive line isn't the best. So we can see here I have their floor down at 5.5, but a ceiling up at 10.4. Next up, we do have the San Francisco 49ers getting the Carolina Panthers. The 49ers defense has not been good this year. This is not a strong play. These are you're reaching for defenses now, but if you're in a deeper league and you need them, this is where my rankings go. I do not believe in the Bryce Young legacy game V2 to happen, but again, the 49ers defense is banged up. They're not amazing. I'm more banking this ranking here on Bryce Young and this offense being a little bit more inefficient than they were last week. So their ceiling is up at 10.5 if that does go right, but their floor down at 5 fantasy points in case it doesn't. We also do have the Philadelphia Eagles getting theirs against the Dallas Cowboys. This one is really just coming from the Eagles defense playing the best in the NFL. They might actually be outside of the Houston Texans from what we saw last week. We know the Dallas Cowboys offense is going to pass a ton, generate a bunch of offense. So it's not necessarily a safe play. I have their floor down at 4 fantasy points. It's very possible they don't have a good game, but a ceiling up at 10.3. If Dak throws some interceptions, if defense gets sacks, what they're good at doing, it could be positive. We also do have the Kansas City Chiefs, a great internal defense, great at stopping the pass and keeping games low scoring, but it is against the Indianapolis Colts, one of the better offenses in the NFL with Jonathan Taylor and all of those guys that are fully healthy. So they're in this ranking as well. And some defenses that you can go through and pick up for the fantasy playoffs if you do want to just have that ready in your back pocket and have some extra space on your roster. The Houston Texans are going to be your number one option. They are number one, a top 5 defense in the NFL, very good internally, but they have top 10 matchups all 3 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. They get the Arizona Cardinals in week 15. In week 17, they get the Las Vegas Raiders, and then they get the Los Angeles Chargers, who have blown up their offensive line and are allowing a lot more sacks now because of that. They probably will have a Marion Hampton back by then, but even then, it's not going to do too much of a difference. We see what they just did to the Bills. You can also get the Buccaneers defense. In week 15, they get the Atlanta Falcons, who are going to have Kirk Cousins. They also get the Carolina Panthers, which, again, I don't really believe in the Bryce Young legacy series that we're going to see. And then also the Miami Dolphins in week 17. They honestly have a better schedule. The only issue is they are a worse internal defense than the Houston Texans are. You can also go through and get the Saints. They have some pretty decent schedules coming up in that aspect as well. In this tier ranking, like, they have a pretty decent schedule, but they are the worst internal defense out of the three. But that's going to finish out this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next videos coming for week 13. Thank you guys so much, man. Good luck in fantasy, and I'll see you there. All glory to the man above.